We have to answer what it means to be an American today. And I'm an America First conservative. I believe just as a father, my obligation is to my family. As your next president, my sole moral duty is to you, the citizens of this country. I believe that deep in my bones. But to put this country first, we now have to rediscover what this country is. What it means to be an American today. That's the task of the next president. To me, it means we believe in those 1776 ideals. Ideals like merit and the pursuit of excellence. That you get ahead in this country, we teach these kids when we can, not in the color of your skin, but in the content of your character and your contributions. That's why we're ending affirmative action and racial quota systems. It means we believe in the rule of law. And I say this as the kid of legal immigrants who came through the front door. That means your first act of entering this country cannot break the law. Which is why I've said we will use our own military to secure our own southern border and our northern border too. That's what it means to stand for the rule of law. It means that we the people create a government that is accountable to us, not the other way around. That means the people who we elect to run the government ought to be the ones who actually run the government. Not the three-letter agencies, the bureaucrats who are never elected, who are wielding power in the shadow government, the deep state that we call today. So if I can't be your next president for more than 8 years, which I think is a good thing, then neither should most of those federal bureaucrats either. 8-year term limits for the bureaucracy instead of civil service protections. 75% reduction in the number of federal bureaucrats in my first term. We have a clear plan to deliver that. That's how you shut down the deep state. That's how you actually drain the swamp. When there are government regulations that Congress never passed, well, you know what? Those are unconstitutional. That's how we drill, frack, burn coal, embrace nuclear energy in this country, unleash this economy. I think it's going to take a CEO to set this straight. Don't start with last year's budget as the baseline and then massage it around the edges. Start with zero as the baseline and ask what's actually necessary. That's how we tackle the national debt. This should be controversial. This should be common sense. I do think it takes an outsider from a new generation with fresh legs to get that right. But these aren't black ideas or white ideas. These aren't even Democrat ideas or Republican ideas, not really. They're American ideals that we fought a revolution to secure. And I believe deep in my heart that those ideals still exist. I'm running for president to revive them. It's on the back of your coins if you take a look at it. If you haven't carry coins anymore. Back of every one. E pluribus unum. It means from many, one. That's what we've lost in this country. We've celebrated our diversity and our differences so much that we forgot all of the ways we're really just the same as Americans. And here's how we're going to get it back. It's going to be by all of us. Not just me. All of us. Starting to speak the truth in the open again. Say in public what you'll say in private at the dinner table. Say it with a spine. Say it with conviction. Say it with respect. But part of respect is that you respect your neighbor enough to tell him what you actually think. That's what this campaign is about. Speaking the truth, not just when it's easy, but when it's hard. Frankly, speaking the truth, not just to the other side, the Democrats, but to our own side, right here in the Republican Party. That's what I've been doing on that debate stage. Sometimes the Republican Party does not approve of this message. There's a reason why I'm the only person in this race who can touch certain topics. The carbon capture pipeline, working its way across a different part of this state. Using eminent domain, that's wrong. The idea that that climate change agenda is a hoax because it has nothing to do with the climate. That Ronna McDaniel, the failed chairwoman of the RNC, needs to step down after 5 failed years of leadership. There's a reason why I'm the only candidate in this race who can say these things. Every politician dances to the tune of their biggest donor. It's like a fact of nature. I've learned that this year. I'm an outsider, and it's far uglier than you expect. In my case, that biggest donor is me. I don't report to them. I report to you, the people of this country. And the things I'm saying on TV and elsewhere, they're controversial not because they're false, but because they are true. Did you guys see the CNN town hall the other night by chance that we did in Iowa, a few of you? It was interesting. They didn't want, how much they cut me off. They didn't want you to hear that message, but that's okay. We're going to make sure the people of this country hear it. The things in there. If I came in here 10 years ago and told you the things in here, you'd shoo me out of here for wasting your time. They're so obvious. Why is the man telling us this? Well, today we have to say them because they've become controversial, but they're still true. That God is real. That there are two genders. Never thought I'd have to say that. That fossil fuels are a requirement for human prosperity. That reverse racism is racism. That an open border is not a border. That parents determine the education of their children. That the nuclear family is still the greatest form of governance known to mankind. That capitalism lifts us up from poverty. That there are 3 branches of government in the United States, not 4. And that the U.S. Constitution is still the strongest and greatest guarantor of freedom in human history. That is the truth. We fight for the truth. We stand up for the truth. That is what won us the American Revolution. And I think that's what's going to win us the revolution of 2024 that's coming up next year. So, thank you for coming out, guys, this morning. I'm excited to have a conversation with you. I want to open this up. Let's have a conversation. Thank you for bearing with my 2 boys here with us. I've gotten to see them all week, and we have about 6 events myself today, so not counting my wife's, and so I'm using this chance to spend the time with them too. But thanks for your patience, and I'd love to open this up and hear from you and have a conversation. I'd say don't hold back also. Give me the hard ones. Give me the hard ones. If I'm going to sit across the table from Xi Jinping, I better be able to stuff. So that's good. And then our team here, whoever's here from our team, keep us on time. Thank you.
You want a really hard question right off the bat?
Yeah, I'll take a really hard one off the bat. Yeah.
What makes you think that any conservative or Republican will ever get in again?
Yeah.
I mean, because...
No, I understand the question. Elections. Just from the way the elections are run?
Yeah. They're going to cheat.
Well, I'll tell you. So one thing I actually left out, I sometimes include in my speech, is one of these basic ideas. What does it mean to be American? It means we have elections that we can trust, that we can believe in. It's not too much to ask as an American. Here's a simple solution. Single-day voting on Election Day as a national holiday. It's a unifying event to say we're all in this together. One day we remember who we are. Paper ballots. Government-issued voter ID to match the voter file. And yes, English as the sole language that appears on a ballot. That's not controversial, that's common sense. Now, your question's the hard one of chicken and egg. How do we get there, right?
Yeah.
So, this is part of why I'm in this. I think it's going to take somebody from the next generation. Somebody with fresh legs to reach the next generation. This cannot be 50.1. This has to be what Reagan did in 1980. A 1980s-style moral mandate. A landslide minus some shenanigans is still a decisive victory. I'm not kidding around. That's what it's going to take this time around. I think I'm the only candidate in this race who can do this. I'll tell you why. 40% of our 150,000 some odd donors are first-time ever donors to the GOP. They include young people, college students, many of them giving $1 at a time. It's not for the money, it's the signal that sends. Some libertarians, liberty-minded independents, America First conservatives, but who haven't showed up to a traditional Republican caucus. By the way, I think that's why we're going to win the Republican caucus. The polls completely miss our supporter base. I don't know how many of you have been polled, but many of our supporters have not, right? And I've seen a lot of heads shake and no. Well, that's why I think we're going to deliver a shock on January 15th. But the same reason we're going to deliver a shock here on January 6th. 15th and win the Iowa caucus, is also why we're going to win the general election by a landslide that we're going to need in order to get this right. And I think that there's a reason why these revolutions, these revivals, they're often led by the next generation. Thomas Jefferson, he was 33 years old when he wrote that Declaration of Independence. I said this at that CNN event the other day here in Iowa. He invented the swivel chair while he was at it. Funny enough, we've lost that spirit, right? And so I'm sick and tired of being I was this guy for, throwing my hands up in the air, watching with frustration as a business leader, watching our country decay. And my faith teaches me God puts each of us here for a purpose. It's our moral duty to realize that purpose. So I could not be an idle bystander watching this go by. God has given each of us our unique gifts. I believe that. And we have a duty to use those gifts. Porv and I, we looked ourselves in the mirror late last year and said, we're not going to be passive bystanders watching this country decay into the country these kids are going to grow up in. And so yes, do we have some problems with our elections? You're not supposed to say this, but yes we do. Yes we do. But are we going to be victimized by that, or are we going to be victorious over that? Victory is our only option. Otherwise we don't have a country left. My oldest son's name is Carl. They go, the give him a hug. It's good. They're not always that friendly to each other. That's a good moment. If he's in high school before we get this right, I don't think we have a country left. I don't say that lightly. We're not working with a lot of time. That's what gives me my sense of urgency. That's what gives me my purpose. And I'm committed to make sure. You guys make me the nominee. If I win the Iowa caucus, I'm your nominee. If you guys make me your nominee, my accountability to you is to deliver you a Reagan 1980 style landslide. I will bring young people, the next generation, along in a scale that this party hasn't done. That's also the beginning of how we revive national pride in a generation that's missing it. So, what's your name, ma'am? Sherry. You do your part. That's on me to do mine. I appreciate that.
I'm here.
Thank you. I appreciate you being here. Thank you. Please, sir.
Vivek, my name is Jacob Wagner. I'm from the Ukrainian community here in Iowa. And I'm an immigrant. 40 years in this country. I'm a proud citizen. We don't have a war in this country, but it's a war of allies. Money, taxpayer money, going to Ukraine, Israel, not yet, but
Yep.
we like for wars to stop. Money is not going to fix the problem. Money
Yes.
will not stop the wars. People die. What is your plan? Do you have a plan?
Yes.
Is it possible to get in there, negotiate and stop the war? Because all the war
Thank you.
stops at there.
Jacob?
Jacob Wagner, yeah.
You came from Ukraine.
Ukrainian, yeah.
When did you immigrate?
94.
94.
Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you, and you're a citizen now?
Yeah, I'm a citizen, yeah.
Thank you for your pride and your decision to come to this country. And I think it's telling for someone who's come from Ukraine to ask a question that the mainstream media will teach you is one that someone from Ukraine would never ask. I think we should speak honestly, so thank you for that, sir. My parents came to this country legally as well, and I know what that journey looks like, just from their experience and what we know of it. So I'll tell you this. How many hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian young men have died, and Russian young men have died? I know we're not supposed to care about, half of them aren't human, so we're not supposed to care about them, but I care about both. I mean, this is wrong. In the name of a moral crusade, we've created immoral outcomes. It's unclear what the next 100 billion is going to do that the first 100 billion didn't do the last time around. And so you're right, money's not going to solve this war. It's required leadership, vision, and diplomacy. Do I have a plan? The answer is yes, I do. I'll tell you what it is. I'm not saying this to boast, I'm the only candidate in this race who's offered a clear vision of how we would end this war. I'm a businessman. I don't trust Vladimir Putin. But I trust him to follow his self-interest just as he can trust us to follow ours. So here's broad strokes the deal I would do. We will make a hard commitment. I'll start with what we'll give. We'll make a hard commitment that NATO will not admit Ukraine to NATO, which is consistent with the commitment we made back in 1990 anyway. And in 1994 again. Further, we would make a commitment that, this is the hard part, but there will have to be some concessions of regions that, in eastern Ukraine, Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, I mean, these are parts, Russian-speaking regions that have been Russian-speaking for much of history. I'm not saying judging right or wrong. I'm looking at what's in our interest to end this war. Those could be concessions we offer in return. We're going to give that for free. In return for demanding and requiring that Putin exit his military alliance with China. That's the single greatest way we reduce the risk of World War III. That's also how the rest of Ukraine keeps its own sovereignty intact. I mean, that's not the track I believe Ukraine is going on now if this war continues on its own current terms. That's a reasonable deal that Putin should do. And I would even open up some economic relations with Russia on the condition that if they renege, it's a maximum pressure campaign the other way. So, will I play hardball with Russia? Absolutely I will. But will I be reasonable to say it's not fighting for the sake of fighting? It's diplomacy for the sake of advancing American interests. As I said, that's my job as your next president. My duty is to you, the citizens, including people like you, Jacob, citizens of this country, not any other one. And I think that that's what it means to reasonably stand for our interests, not just for the short run, but over the long run. And the same broken foreign policy establishment that took us, our sons and daughters, to decades of war in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, just those two wars, adding $7 trillion to our national debt. Thousands of our sons and daughters gone to go die in those wars. Corrupt politicians killed millions in those wars. Spent trillions. Made billions for themselves. Don't forget that part. To wars that didn't advance the American interest. That's not going to happen on my watch. We have a $34 trillion national debt problem right now. My kids, on their shoulders. Young people in this room, you have $200,000 more of debt on your shoulders than you knew you had. Than you signed up for. Because an old generation of politicians bequeathed that on you. $7 trillion of that due to just the two wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I refuse to make those same mistakes again. And the reality is there's a little bit of an underbelly to this. It's an ugly topic you're not supposed to talk about. But it's no accident that the country that paid Hunter Biden a $5 million alleged bribe is the same country that's now getting $200 billion of our own taxpayer money. And I'm not just going to sit here and criticize the Democrats. I mean, you have Republicans that have the same problem. People who have used their time in government to start military contracting firms, join boards of companies like Boeing, give speeches to foreign actors. That's wrong. It's corrupt when Republicans do it. It's corrupt when Democrats do it. It's going to take somebody from the outside. I'm not in this to make money. I mean, to the contrary, we're spending tens of millions of dollars of our families. We didn't inherit it, but hard-earned money. That's the inheritance we want to give our sons. We don't a bunch of green pieces of paper. What's the point of that if we don't have a country left? We want to give them the inheritance of a country we grew up in, but that starts with making sure that your generation isn't going to be fighting somebody else's war with somebody else's gun over your shoulder and $200,000 of national debt per person to go along with it. No. That ends on my watch, and that's a reasonable deal that I would do with Jacob. It counters the mainstream narrative. I hope they report on a Ukrainian man. They probably won't, but these are good people here. Their bosses won't let them. But I've met actually many of my Ukrainian friends in Ohio and otherwise have the same view that you do. What's happening isn't right, and it takes real leadership to stop it. So, thank you. Please.
Not to drag you out, but how do you stop a military alliance with two other countries? And two, if you give some now, you give, and I'm not saying your answer is wrong, because I know
it's a good question.
The right answer. So if you give some of Ukraine now, what's going to stop from having to give more later?
Yeah, great question. I love that. Right. So this is good. We should just get beneath the surface. I had an English teacher from 11th grade, Miss Smith. She said, "You don't understand what you believe if you can't make the best argument for the other side," and that stuck with me. So I love pressure testing. So we'll do it like Nixon did in 1972. Did Nixon trust Mao Zedong? No, he didn't. But we trusted that it was in our self-interest and his to get Mao, who was the leader of Communist China back then, out of the alliance they had with the USSR. And that was probably the critical event that allowed the Soviet Union to begin the path to the near end of the Cold War that paved the way eventually for Reagan a decade or so later. So that's what happened. Here it's in our self-interest and in Putin's self-interest to say, listen up. You get some important things you need that you require, even reopened economic relations with the West. Why did they go to China? Because we've closed them off. Right? So if they don't depend on us, they're going to go to, they can't trade with us, they're going to trade with somebody. That's what's driving them to China. We're arming Ukraine to the teeth. That's why China ends up arming Russia. So our own policies have actually strengthened the Russia-China alliance, which, by the way, is the single greatest threat we face. See, Russia's got a bigger nuclear stockpile than we do, hypersonic missile capabilities ahead of ours. Those are missiles that travel faster than the speed of sound. China has a naval capacity bigger than ours. It's a dirty little ugly truth. That's just a reality we have to confront. We depend on them for our military supplies. They don't depend on us to build theirs. So their industrial base is ahead of ours now when it comes to Navy and shipbuilding. And by the way, we depend on China for our modern way of life, from everything from our pharmaceuticals to our electronics. So that alliance is dangerous. That's the single greatest risk of World War III, which we're closer to now than we've ever been in my lifetime. And I don't say this lightly. If we enter World War III under these circumstances, when our homeland is as vulnerable as we've been, there's a real risk that the United States of America, as we know it right now, could cease to exist.
The whole world.
I mean,
The whole world.
absolutely. But including the greatest nation known to man. And I won't be the president who presides over just watching that happen like a slow motion train wreck. So how do we do it? Hard backstop agreements, right? If they start joint military exercises with China, maximum pressure campaign in the other direction. It's a stronger deal than Ukraine and Russia brokering their own deal if it's backstopped by U.S. interests. And we've reopened economic relations with Russia on the back of it. Putin has no reason. I mean, and you're pulling me deep. Let me go deeper here. I don't usually do this, but this is Iowa, right? So this is great. This is what this is supposed to be about. If you look with the magnifying lens at the Russia-China relationship right now, there are kinks in that armor, just like there were in 1972 when Nixon did his deal. So when Putin and Xi Jinping met, this is really important. He's sending a signal. They had a no-limits partnership, a lot of flowery language. But then right after the meeting, the next day, Putin sends arms to India and Vietnam, which share a border with China. So he's sending a signal. China wants to build a railroad in northeast China to meet the sea, because northeast China is impoverished by their absence of access to the sea, but it runs through Russia. Russia's not letting them do it. Putin does not enjoy being Xi Jinping's little brother right now. So it takes somebody with vision to see this and say, this is our opportunity to get this right. We depend on China. We're so scared to cut that off. Right now, Xi Jinping has held on to an unprecedented third term as the leader of communist China. That's what the zero COVID policies were about. They had nothing to do with COVID. China's economy is now weaker. They're facing deflation, which is worse than inflation. So if we actually play hardball with China then, say we're going to cut off the economic cord, open relations with Russia, but say we're going to roll back relations with China economically, China's in a tougher spot than we are, and then has to play by the same set of rules. So this is our moment to get this right, but it takes somebody, and Nixon brought this in '72, stood up to the establishment foreign policy. It's going to take somebody with a fresh perspective, who isn't captured by the special interests that have led us into many of these no-win wars. And this has been something that's come up on the GOP debate stage a couple of times over. The other candidates, Mike Pence, and Chris Christie, and Tim Scott, and most recently Nikki Haley, raising my lack of foreign policy experience. Foreign policy experience is not the same as foreign policy wisdom. In fact, if you want the experience, give the key to the guy who's been crashing your car for the last 25 years. Don't turn over the keys again to the same establishment. It's bipartisan. From Joe Biden to Dick Cheney to Nikki Haley to Liz Cheney to the next generation of leadership in both parties. It's going to take fresh leadership to do it. And, people said it was this a little bit unfair attack in the last debate. Did anybody see the last debate? Only a few of you. There was a moment where I said, look, can you even name 3 of the provinces in eastern Ukraine that you want us to fight for? Neither Nikki Haley nor Chris Christie, who I challenged to do it, could do it on stage. And then they said I was attacking their intelligence. I'm not attacking their intelligence. The competence. If you're going to send our sons and daughters and $200 billion of our money to go fight, you better darn well know what you're fighting for. And that's the intellectual fraud at the heart of this bipartisan foreign policy failure. They have no idea what the hell they're talking about, actually. It's a pro-war instinct for the sake of it. And so, yes, I do think it's going to take a new generation with fresh perspective and level-headed American interests at heart to secure our own interests, protect our own homeland. Our borders are wide open. We're vulnerable to missile defenses, cyber attacks, super EMP attacks that we haven't seen in my lifetime. Fix that. That's my foreign policy. Avoid World War III. Declare economic independence from communist China. And then use our own resources to protect our own homeland. And if that's a radical idea in today's defense establishment, then that tells you it's time to clean house at the Pentagon and move forward to a new generation of leadership. Hope that answers your question, sir. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming, Vivek. As a fellow Asian American, this is something that I've thought a lot about, and it's a very politicized issue. But can you answer in a straightforward way, why is it that on average, Asian Americans are said to flourish more than other people of color in this country?
Well, you're not supposed to ask that question, you racist. Shut up, sit down, do as you're told. Fair enough. I think we should be able, that's what I said at the beginning, we got to be able to speak openly. So if you look at the fatherlessness rate, I'll give you one statistic that can explain 80% of it. Imagine that we didn't see people according to their race. So we're behind a veil of ignorance, and I couldn't tell you whether somebody's black, Hispanic, white, Asian, or anything else. But I told you it was a fact that was true for everybody. That if you're born in a fatherless home or a single-parent household, you're 8 times more likely to end up in prison, over 10 times more likely to end up in poverty, and not to graduate from high school, to suffer from mental health illnesses and otherwise. That's true for all of us, regardless of skin color. Now we lift the veil, and we see that the black fatherlessness rate is toward 45%. White fatherlessness rate, the blended is about 25%, so that means the white fatherlessness rate is at least in the 25%. Hispanic fatherlessness rate, similarly. Asians, Americans, in the single digits. So there's nothing magical about the heritage of being Asian. It just goes back to the hard truth I said earlier. The nuclear family is the greatest form of governance known to mankind. I'm at the age of 38, able to I've built multi-billion-dollar companies, lived the American dream. Sometimes the life that we live now, that this country has blessed us to live. My parents would have never imagined it 40 years ago when they came to this country. I would have never imagined it when we were going through, my dad was facing down layoffs at the GE plant in Evendale, Ohio. That rocked our family when I was in middle school. But we are where we are now, so people see that now and say, oh, did you grow up in privilege? That's a word people use now. Did you have privilege? I actually started answering that question a little differently than I used to. No, I didn't grow up in money. It was initially defensive and say, no, I didn't. I did through hard work. But actually, look at it differently. Yes, I did have privilege. I had the ultimate privilege of 2 parents in the house with a focus on education and instilling in us a basic set of very traditional values. I didn't have a traditional upbringing. I had what you would call a very traditional upbringing. They taught us family is the foundation. Marriage is sacred. It's between a man and a woman. That's what they taught us. That abstinence before marriage is the way to go. That divorce isn't some option. You just pick off a menu and things go wrong. That there's more to this life than just this life, but eternal life. That the good things in life involve sacrifice. I think many immigrant families, I think many American families who have been here for generations, those are values they instill in their kids too. They seem like foreign values today. Go to your DEI training at your local company. See what they're teaching your kids in school. Go to the movie theater. Those feel like foreign values, but they're not foreign to most of us. I think those are consistent with the values in the 10 Commandments. Consistent with the values of people of multiple different faiths who still comprise the backbone of people who love this country and the founding ideals of our country. But that's part of what we've lost. I think part of the job of the next U.S. president is to not just fix that through policy. We can do that. We're paying single mothers more money not to have a man in the house than to have a man in the house. That's how it works. Our taxpayer money is literally paying for that today. So some of this is policy. But some of this is a revival of our national character, actually. And I think a standard that I would like you all to hold us to, Apoorva and I and our family to, is I want you to be able to look your kids in the eye. I want to be able to look my 2 sons in the eye and tell them that I want you to grow up and be like whoever that is in the White House. I think it's been a long time since we've held our presidents to that standard. But I think we live in a moment where half the job of the next U.S. president isn't just the policy, it's reviving our national character and setting an example for this country as well. And I think that family as foundation is something easy, relatively speaking, that we can bring back that I think will make a lot of our problems from violent crime to depression and anxiety and fentanyl usage go down in this country. Go to you, sir.
Oh,
My Vikings fan right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a recent college graduate, I took my gen ed, I took a marriage and family course, and during that course, they were directly attacking the nuclear family, and we had to write a paper about it, talking about diversity and everything else. I was trying to stand up for the nuclear family, but they're punishing the students by writing about it, giving us a lower grade compared to talk about their political ideas.
Yep.
How do we combat this in universities and colleges?
What's your name?
Nathan,
Nathan. How old are you now?
21.
It's harder for you. I mean, I went to Harvard for college. It was well famously, left wing and left leaning, but it's a different place today than it even was when I went there. Because back then it was still. I feel like I got a better education because of it. Because as somebody had different views than the predominant views, my views were tested. But then I got to come out with greater conviction, and so I got more of my money's worth. It's something else going on today, where in the name of diversity, we've created actually a culture of unforgiving conformity that punishes dissent. In the name of inclusion, we've created a culture of exclusion where certain points of view aren't welcome. And I just want to get to the heart of what's going on is we have a concept, a beautiful concept and tradition in this country of protecting ourselves against the tyranny of the majority. Well, in the name of protecting against the tyranny of the majority, right, the Christian majority or the traditional majority or whatever, we've created a new tyranny of the minority, actually, which is the bizarre reality of what's happening in this country. But this presents an opportunity, but it requires some work from me. It requires some work from me. I have my role to play as your next president. You have your role to play as a leader from your next generation. It's going to be this. As I said, these revolutions, these revivals, they're often led by young people. That doesn't come without some risk. So when you find yourself, I think every one of us, when we find ourselves in a room and you are the only person in that room who believes what you do, I think you have an obligation now more than ever to stand up and say it. Is there some risk in doing that? Yes, there is. I was a biotech CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company that I built as CEO. I led it for 7 years. I had to face the choice when I was pressured to take a stand in favor of BLM, Black Lives Matter, after the George Floyd death and the riots that ravaged this country. I refused to do it. That came at some cost. Multiple advisors to my company resigned. So I'm not just saying this in a callous way. I understand that involves risk and trade-off. I ended up stepping down from my job as a CEO to write the books that I wrote, ultimately led into the journey I'm on right now. So I don't know where your journey is going to take you, but here's what I will tell you right now. This is even different from 5 years ago. Today, if you stand up and do your part, you're the only person in that room and speak your mind with conviction. Almost every time now, you're going to find that you were not the only person in that room who believed what you did. I think we're on the cusp of a turning point in this country right now. If we have the courage to stand up and see it. Fear has been infectious. I said that before, but courage can be contagious too, actually. I've seen it. I believe it. History teaches us that. It just requires more of us willing to stand up for what's right. And so, that's an important point, actually. This country isn't going to be saved by one president coming from on high from the White House to save us. If we're going to be saved when it comes to the civic realm of our lives, I'm not talking about the spiritual realm, but the civic realm of our lives, it is going to be because we step up and save ourselves. And so you do your part. I'm going to do mine, and each of us has a role to play in reviving that national character. You tell me your name.
Chris. My name is Chris.
Feel free to.
I'm an educator, and everything you're talking about is like hits home to me because I teach government. And these
To what
kids-
age group, if you don't mind
I
asking?
teach seniors in high school, and they don't have an interest in like understanding the Constitution or understand the importance of the Constitution. And then it scares me because I know technology is really important, but I feel like our kids' minds are turning to mush because they think I can just look it up on the internet. I don't have to know anything.
Yeah, it's interesting,
I
right?
can't even read a clock
It's
because
interesting. So fascinating.
you know, I can't do fractions. I can't do all of these things because it's there for them on their phones or on their computers. We're struggling right now with like kids writing papers with AI and us trying to like not let that happen. And it is so hard, and I don't know what to do to fix it.
So I don't say this blithely, Chris.
It's the families. We need families again. We need parents.
But how do we get parents to step up and take that
No,
responsibility?
it's like this guy here saying
Education starts with the family, but I can say that, but how do we make it so?
Because the
I
reality
think we live
is,
in a moment right now.
the reality is, we have a lot of kids who aren't into
Who don't have the first clue.
So
I will
it'd be
tell you
nice
this.
to say, oh, you know, this would fix it, but the problem is, like,
Well, first of all, it starts much younger. That's why
Right.
I asked you, I had that in mind when I asked you who you're teaching. You're teaching high school seniors. This starts much earlier. I will say this, and I don't take this obligation on lightly. You put me in that office, some of this is a leadership of national character that starts from the top. Young people are hungry to be part of something bigger than ourselves, yet they can't even answer what it means to be an American. That's where the climate god comes from. That's what it is, a false idol. That's what that is. I mean, these are wokeism or transgenderism or climatism. These are religions that are substituting for true belief, at least in a nation bigger than the one bigger than ourselves. So, I'll just give you an example. I'll give you a couple of things that I will tell you. I believe that every high school senior should have to pass the same civics test that every immigrant has to pass in order to become a voting citizen of this country, that Jacob had to pass to become a voting citizen of this country. Now, that has generated immense controversy. It sent shockwaves when I first unveiled that here in Iowa about 6 months ago. So a little girl heard about that. Her name was Lena. She's 10 years old. She came to a pizza ranch event of mine last week. She was a girl who came to one of my events. She brought a printed out 100-question civics test. 60% is a passing score. Most people in their 20s today would fail it. And these are basic questions. How many branches of government are there? What are they? What branch does the president lead? Who are the authors of the Federalist Papers? That's probably the hardest question on there. Or questions like that. 10 years old. Lena Anderson is her name. She brought it out to me and she had a handwritten note for me. She said, I wanted you to know that I took this myself and I got 100 out of 100 on it. And if somebody tells you that a high school senior can't do it, tell them that a 10-year-old girl did it. So that I met her mother. I met her mother, actually, who brought her to that event. And I asked her, tell me what school she's going to. She said she's homeschooled. That's what she told me. And she started young. Because this girl, I mean, she started when she's 6 years old with this. Part of this starts with a president who sets a tone for our national character. I'll tell you guys where I was last night. I add a little bit of levity to this. We've been to 29 counties in the last 5 days here in Iowa. We've been to the full Grass Lake Times too. So we had 4 events across the state yesterday. Last night I was in Orlando at a boxing fight with Jake Paul. He's an influencer, he's a 24-year-old guy reaching the next generation. I got back about 1 a.m. We got about 6 events today. But I went there for a reason, not because I'm a fan of some sports. I've never been to a boxing match before. Why do I go to these things? We have to make faith and family and patriotism and hard work cool again, actually, in this country. I met a social media influencer who was there. Many of you may not know him. I didn't know him. Everybody over the age of 25 will know him. But so I told him about this thing about English as the language, as a sole language on a ballot. He said, that's a crazy idea. It's exclusionary. We had about a 15-minute conversation. By the end of that, he was converted. He said, no, I get it now. He said, at first I thought you were just giving me a hot take, but now I get it. And so he's going to tell about 20 million young people who follow him the same thing. I can do this in a way that Donald Trump or any other patriot who loves this country and has been a good leader, I'll say that about Trump, he did a lot that was good for this country. But I can do this in a way that the others can't. That's what gives me my responsibility in this race. A leader with fresh legs from the next generation to reach the next generation and to make those concepts cool. I mean, really, today, you want to be, where does wokeism and the epidemic come from? It's about sticking it to the man. Right? It's not about being a young person. You want to be heterodox. You want to stick it to the system. Stand up to the man. Systemic racism, invisible injustices, whatever it is. And say what you will, 20 years ago, that was an original idea. Somewhat. But today, what began as a challenge to the system has become the system. So you want to be a hippie today? You want to be countercultural? You want to stick it to the man? Try calling yourself a conservative. Say you want to get married, have children, stay married to someone of the opposite gender. I mean, these are radical radical ideas today, right? I think of many of our youth, and I think that that's something that we live in a moment where I'm done throwing my hands up in the air and complaining about it. I see what you see, and it's real. But we go through these cycles. That's what history teaches us. There's an old expression that goes, and part is because we do have information at our fingertips. Our founding fathers had to go to a library 100 miles away, wait for a book for several months, and they could speak multiple different languages. They could tell you the Greek and Roman origins of the traditions in our country long before we had an internet. Isn't it interesting how that works? And so there's an old saying, it goes, it's often attributed to the founder of Dubai, I think it was. My grandfather rode a camel. My father rode a camel. I ride a Mercedes. My son rides a Land Rover. My grandson rides a Land Rover, but my great-grandson is going to ride a camel again. See, hard times create strong men. Strong men create easy times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. I mean, that's really where we are in this cycle. But it doesn't have to stay that way. And maybe it's maybe a good point for us to wrap on. We could take some pictures and hang out until they drag me out of here. But on that theme of where we are in these cycles of history, I don't think we have to be ancient Rome. So we're taught to believe we're at the end of the ancient Roman Empire now. I don't think we have to be that nation in decline. I think the truth is, as a nation right now, we're really a little young, actually. Going through our own version of our adolescence. Figuring out who we're going to be when we grow up. And when you view it that way, it makes sense. You go through that adolescence, you go through that identity crisis. You lose your way a little bit. You do some stupid things. Some of us did, probably I did. But we are stronger for it when we get to our adulthood on the other side. So no, I don't think we have to be that nation in decline. I think we can still be, and I think this is the last time I'm going to be able to walk in here and tell you this. I don't think I could come here in 2028 or 2032 and tell you this. I think I can tell you this now, though. I think this is our last chance for me to tell you this. We can still be a nation in our ascent. Maybe even the early stages of our ascent. Maybe we're not even at base camp. On our way still to that shining city on a hill that Reagan spoke of. I love Ronald Reagan, but I'm not going to be the guy who tells you it's morning in America right now. It's not. Looks like it does this morning. But it can be. I'm not going to tell you the American dream is alive and well. It's not right now. I can't look a young person in the eye and tell you that. It's alive and hanging on for life support. But it can be. I'm here to ask you for your help in reviving that. A guy like me isn't supposed to do this. The system isn't set up for it. Coming in from the outside, from the next generation, bucking the Republican establishment, taking certain positions. I mean, when I said I would pardon peaceful protesters from January 6th, the Republican establishment does not approve of that message. Ron McDaniel, when I criticized our party's failures, said I won't get another cent of funding from the RNC. That's fine. I don't report to them. I report to you. And I'm here to ask you for your help to use me as your instrument, to get done what needs to get done for this country. The Iowa caucus, you all go first for a reason. Every one of your votes here is like the equivalent of 1 million people in the impact it has on choosing the president. If I win this Iowa caucus, I'm your next president. If I'm your next president, the things I told you we'd get done, shutting down the deep state and those agencies, growing this economy as a result, declaring independence from China, keeping us out of World War III, all those things I'll get done. But the thing I will most want to get done and believe we will get done by the time I leave office in January 2033 is that those high school seniors that you will be teaching them, that my two sons and their generation, that they will once again be proud to be citizens of this nation. I'm not going to do that alone, but if you all take 30 minutes of your time on January 15th and come out to that caucus, my team is here. I'm going to ask them to collect what we've left here for you. We'll tell you exactly where to go. You all do your part. I promise you, my wife Apurva and I and our family, we're going to do ours. To make sure, not in some cheesy politician way, but in a true way, to make sure that our country's best days are, yes, still ahead of us. Thank you for coming today, guys. God bless you.